everyone, my name is Norvia and welcome back to my channel. Diving right into this video, the first thing I'm going to do is update my August key and calendar. In the key, I'll assign each book a color and then I'll go up into the calendar to update which days I read each book. The first book I finished was Heavenbreaker by Sara and I had started this book last month and was able to finish it this month. I also read Rogue Protocol by Martha Wells, Onyx Storm by Yarros, The Assassin's Blade by Sara J. Maas, and Shield of Sparrows by Devney Perry. Finally, I was able to start Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, but didn't finish it, so that'll be included in next month's video. After updating that page, I'll move on to do my first decorated review spread for Heavenbreaker. When I'm doing a decorated spread, I like to decorate it one of two ways. Either I'll focus the decoration on the book cover, or I'll focus the decoration around the elements that are found in the book. For this specific review, I decided to base my decoration on the book cover, since I don't have a lot of stationery that reminded me of the plot or the setting in the actual book. This book cover has a lot of dark blues, blacks, and golds, so that's what I use for my main color scheme. First, I glued down a piece of origami paper in the upper left-hand corner to anchor the page. In the bottom right-hand corner, I placed a dark blue and gold flower sticker, as well as a piece of fan art from the book. The book cover also features a bird, so I decided to use bird wing stickers as well. Also, if you haven't done so already, please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel. Finally, I used a gold paint pen on top of some black craft paper to draw some leaf and star doodles, cut them out, and then glue them on the page as well. Moving on to the actual book, the setting of Heavenbreaker is in space, where people live on several space stations. There are various kinds of people on these space stations, and they can range anywhere from being very rich nobles to being very poor. The main character is a girl named Sonali, and she was born as an illegitimate child to the Duke of Hautclair, one of the noble families on this station. The noble families don't like to have any scandals, so the Duke sends an assassin after Sonali and her mother. Sonali's mother is murdered, but Sonali is able to get away. After this, Sonali is determined to get revenge on the House of Hautclair. One of the ways she is going to do this is by entering a competition that only nobles can enter. As I said before, this is set in space, so one of the main forms of entertainment for the station is when nobles go out into space in these big humanoid machines called steeds. In this competition, the steeds basically compete in what is space jousting. That's pretty much as I can tell you without spoiling some major plot points. If you've never watched my videos before, I'll never give spoilers in the voiceover. However, the written reviews will contain spoilers, so just read those at your own risk. Also, here comes my cat Nacho to give us a little visit. He shows up quite a bit in this video, since just before filming this, I was gone for a week on a little trip, and so he was very clingy and wanted to be near me. As for my own review on this book, I'm pretty neutral about it. I don't think it was amazing, but it also wasn't terrible. I think it had a very interesting concept, but the matches quickly got repetitive. Also, I had a hard time liking a lot of the characters in this book. I eventually grew to understand Sonali, but she was never really a lovable character to me. I also didn't like the two main side characters, Rax or Morel. Also, looking back on this book, nothing really stuck with me, and I never really thought about it afterwards. The ending does have a twist that makes me a little bit interested in reading the next book, but overall it kind of gave me a meh feeling, so I'm going to rate it 3 stars. The second book I read this month was Rogue Protocol, which is the third book in the Murderbot Diaries. I decided to give this book no decoration for its review and also only have it be half a page. I decided to do this for a couple reasons. Firstly, the audiobook was only 3 hours and 46 minutes long, so I didn't feel I needed a whole page to write about this book. Secondly, I used a lot of my stationery that would relate to this book when I did the decorated review spread for All Systems Red, the first book in the series. I didn't just want to do a repeat of that spread, so I decided to leave it blank. Moving on to the actual book, as I said before, this is the third book in the series, and saying pretty much anything about what happens would spoil the first two. Overall, I think this book did a good job of continuing the series, and it was able to add a little bit of emotional depth that we haven't seen before. For those reasons, I decided to rate this book 3.5 stars. Moving on, the third book I read this month was Onyx Storm. For this review spread, I wanted to switch things up a little bit from how I usually do things. When I was decorating the review spreads for both Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, the decorations were mostly focused towards the outer corners. While I did do that a little bit for this spread, I also wanted something that went from the bottom left corner to the top right and spanned both pages. To do this, I took a piece of origami paper and ripped it into a couple pieces so that the edges would be torn. I glued the first piece down on the left page, then glued the second piece down on the right page, making sure that they connected and went to the page edges. Next, with some fan art that I found online, I was able to glue and place those pieces in 3 of the corners. Then in the remaining corner, I was able to place this black ink blotch sticker. Then I glued these dragon silhouettes over top of the origami paper. Moving on to the actual book, I think Onyx Storm is my favorite out of the entire series. In order of most to least favorite, I think it goes Onyx Storm, Fourth Wing, then Iron Flame. One of my problems with Iron Flame was that it was too complicated and too much stuff was happening at the same time. Onyx Storm still had a lot of plots going on simultaneously, but it was much more readable and I was able to understand and keep up with all of the plot lines. Also, even though I was previously spoiled about some of the events in this book, when they happened, I still cried multiple times even though I knew they were coming. Also, the last couple pages had so many twists and turns that I didn't see coming and left us on a huge cliffhanger. I don't know how I'll make it through waiting until the next book comes out. All in all, I really loved this book, so I decided to rate it 4.5 stars. The next book I read this month was The Assassin's Blade. I decided to start out my Throne of Glass series read with this book first. I know that there's various opinions on this, and some people say to read this book first, and some people say to read this one third or fourth. If you've already read this series, please leave a comment down below telling me which order you read it in and if you liked it or not. I decided to read The Assassin's Blade first since I wanted to go in chronological order because it's easier for me to keep track of things that way. Also, I've heard if you read this book third or fourth, a lot of the events that happen are spoiled in the other Throne of Glass books, and I didn't want that to happen. For the decoration of this page, I decided to take some specific elements from each of the 5 novellas. I've got several stickers with things like a woman sitting on a horse, as well as some depicting blades, guns, and jewelry. I've also got some scrapbook paper with some handwriting on it as well. For the main title on this page, I decided I wanted to mimic the main font on the book cover, so I broke out my old calligraphy pens. With this type of calligraphy pen, it has a chiseled tip that you hold at a specific angle as you write. You don't need to put any specific type of pressure on the upstrokes or downstrokes with this type of calligraphy. The angle of the chisel tip will make certain parts of the letters wider and other parts smaller. Again, I'm not going to say too much about this book since it can be read first, third, or fourth in the series. However, I will say that I really liked how all of these novellas connected together and gave us a good in-depth background of Selena's character. At first, I decided to rate this book 3.5 stars, but later came back to it and decided to up it to 3.75 stars. I do think it'll be interesting to look back and see if my opinion on this book changes once I read the other books in the Throne of Glass series. The final book I read this month was Shield of Sparrows. For the decoration of this page, I started it out by adding a piece of scrapbook paper to the top left corner of the page. This piece of paper had a map on it that featured a landmass, ocean, and a ship. Next, I placed down a couple flower stickers that mimicked the look of the flowers on the cover. Also, to mimic the cover, I placed a crown sticker over top of the flower stickers. Next, I went online and found fan art of all of the monsters found in this book. I printed and cut them out and then glued them down to make my own stickers. Moving on to the storyline of the book, the main character is a princess named Odessa. In her world, there's an ancient treaty that unites all of the kingdoms by joining royal children in marriages. However, she is not the one chosen to marry a prince from another land. Instead, it's her sister May who is supposed to marry. But when the prince comes to marry her sister, he decides he wants to marry Odessa instead. Odessa is then forced to marry him and go back with him to his own kingdom. Odessa is tasked by her father to be a spy for him and to gather information on the prince and his secret capital city, Alisaria. I had seen so many ads for this book on Instagram and seen a lot of people talking about it, so I was really looking forward to reading it. However, I think I had too high of expectations for this book, and so I was let down a little bit. Also, for most of the book, I had an idea in my head for where the book was going and what was going to happen. So when those things didn't happen, I was a little bit confused and thrown off. After taking some time to reflect on my thoughts and feelings about the book, I realized that those things were entirely my fault and not something that the book did wrong. I still enjoyed the book a lot, but it was just a lot slower than I thought it was going to be. One thing I really did like about this book was how it avoided some of the really popular tropes that you see nowadays. I loved how Odessa wasn't the chosen one and wasn't already trained and amazing at fighting. I also really enjoyed the world building in this story and learning about all of the unique monsters. Overall, I had a mix of feelings about this book, and there were things I liked and things I didn't, but in the end, I decided to rate it 4 stars. Going back to my August monthly pages, I'll start filling out the stats and putting in my book covers and star ratings. At the top of the page is my chart for my most read genres of this month. I was able to read 3 romance books, 3 fantasy books, and 2 science fiction books. Next, I'll move on to filling in my 3 pie graphs. The first pie graph is for how I source my books. This month, 4 books came from Libby and 1 from Audible. The second pie graph is for the format of my books, and like usual, all 5 of my books were audiobooks. The final pie graph is for the page number of my books, and this month, 1 book was under 300 pages, 2 books were between 300 and 499 pages, and 2 books were 500 pages plus. As I said before, I was able to read a total of 5 books, with the total number of pages read being 1,865. My average star rating was 3.75 stars, and my average book length was 373 pages. Finally, it took me an average of 7 days to finish a book. The last thing I'll do to finish up this page is add a little bit more decoration to the remaining empty spaces. Next, I'll flip back to the beginning of my journal to fill out my yearly pages. The first page I'll work on is my books read in 2025 spread. This is just a spot for me to see all of the books I've read this year in one space. For each book that I read, first I'll number it, and then I'll write in its title, author, and rating. Next, I'll move on to my on the shelf page. This is just a visual representation of my goal of reading 40 books this year. Each spot on the bookshelf is colored in according to its star rating, and then the title is written over top. Next to this, on the right page, is my top TBR. This is just the top 12 books I most wanted to read this year. This month, I was able to read The Assassin's Blade, so I'll fill in the star rating and then move on. Next is my book bingo and bingo prompts page. Once I read a book that fulfills one of these prompts, I'll peel off the tape to reveal which box I need to fill in. This month, I was only able to match one prompt by reading Onyx Storm for a 2025 new release. However, I was able to get another bingo in row 2. For this bingo, I read Onyx Storm for a 2025 new release, The Song of Achilles for a physical book, Thornhedge for a fairy tale retelling, The Bridge Kingdom for a dual POV, and Project Hail Mary for a standalone book. Flipping the page once again, we'll move on to my prioritization matrix. I'm using this matrix in place of a book bracket for this year. I've used book brackets previously, but don't like how it only tells you your top book of the year. Using this matrix will allow me to tally up points of which books win against each other, and I'll be able to create a list of 1 to 12 for my most to least favorite books. This month, Onyx Storm was my favorite, so that'll get written at the bottom of the page. Then I'll go into the matrix to compare this book to my other favorites. Finally, the last yearly page I'll fill out is my series tracker. This month, I started 3 new series and continued 2 others. Flipping forward once more in my journal, I'll start working on my September monthly pages. The first thing I'll do to this page is start cutting out my Dutch door. I like to switch up my setups in my reading journal, so some months I'll have no Dutch doors, some months I'll have vertical Dutch doors, and some months I'll have horizontal ones. This month, I decided to have a horizontal Dutch door at the top of the page. I will caution you, when doing this type of Dutch door, don't cut too close to the binding. Leave a little bit of page left over, that way you can glue it or tape it down and you don't risk ruining the binding and having your pages come apart. After I finish cutting out the page, I'll then tape down the remaining bit with a little bit of green washi tape. Next, I'll outline my calendar on the left page. Then I'll move on to starting to decorate the page. For this month's theme, I use a mix of green washi tape, as well as some pink washi tape with white hearts, some pink scrapbook paper, and these watermelon theme stickers from Sticky. Next, I'll move back over to my calendar to color it in, fill in all the numbers, and fill in the days of the week. Finally, I'll do a little bit more decoration before adding in my September and key titles. Also, I'm sorry for the camera shaking and moving the journal a little bit out of screen. This is due to my cat Nacho once more coming by and bumping the camera setup. With that last title added, it's time for the final flip through to see all of the spreads I've created in this video. Thank you so much for watching all the way till the end of my video. I would love if you could leave a comment down below letting me know which spread was your favorite. Again, thank you so much, and I'll see you in my next video.